Hello everyone, I'm Annu Kaushik. Welcome to my channel Justin by Annu. I am joined by Sahar Tartak, who is a Jewish student at the Yale University in the US. She is a second year Jewish student. Now, on October 12th, Sahar's article was published in the Yale Daily, which is the student run newspaper of the Yale University. It was titled, Is Yaleys for Palestine a Hate Group? Now, in this particular article, Sahar talked about Yaleys for Palestine's comment on the Hamas attack on Israel, the October 7th attack. Before that, let me tell you what happened during that attack. Over 1,200 Israelis were killed in that attack. More than 200 of them were killed at a music festival. Women were raped. People, including elderly and children, were taken hostages. Now, on 9th of October, Yaleys for Palestine published a post in which they hailed the attack. They called Hamas a resistance group, and they even called people to come and support the resistance. And Sahar had published an article on this particular post by Yaleys for Palestine. On 25th of October, changes were made to Sahar's article, saying that the claims that Hamas had raped women and beheaded men were unsubstantiated. Now, a massive online outrage followed, and Yale issued another correction. Details regarding the Hamas attack were reinstated in the article. Sahar, can you give our viewers the whole account of what exactly happened?
Of course, thank you so much for having me today. So, Yaleys for Palestine is a registered student group on Yale's campus that immediately following the October 7th massacres by Hamas against Israeli civilians made posts justifying the events and absolving the terrorists of their responsibility for their actions. And so I wrote an article in the Yale Daily News, which is Yale University's flagship major newspaper. Its writers are known to go into very important journalistic roles. They often work for the New York Times, the Washington Post, and so on. So I published this article in the Yale Daily News. And a couple weeks after it was published, the editors removed my mentions of Hamas raping women and beheading men and said in a statement added to the end of the article that those claims were unsubstantiated. Now, of course, this was not true. Not only did Hamas film everything themselves for the world to see, but also journalists were on the ground within 48 hours recording the events. So people saw this online, and a lot of people, including alumni who went to Yale and were editors of the Yale Daily News, expressed their outrage. I myself wrote an article expressing just how baffling this was and how it was such an obvious example of denial of Hamas's brutalities. And then the Yale Daily News undid their correction. I will note that I actually had given them a chance to undo it before all of it went public. I contacted them privately and I said, "Hi, what's going on? Can you change this?" And they justified what they did by saying that when my article was published, the claims were uncertain, even though 2 weeks later they were certain. So they were retroactively making the change, which of course nobody does. And also they were retroactively making the change based on things that weren't true. Things were substantiated, basically.
Did the Yale Daily reach out to you before issuing their first correction, before removing references to the Hamas attack? Did they reach out to you?
No, I was not informed, and I discovered it only because one of my parents' friends had read the article and said they should correct this correction. And I said, "What correction?" And then I looked at the article and I was shocked. And they did this to another student as well, and she didn't know either.
Now, on October 31st, when Yale finally reinstated references to the Hamas attack, they also published an editorial So are you satisfied with their response?
Yeah, I was satisfied with their response. I think it's just really concerning that this happened in the first place. It's a modern day act of Holocaust denial. And the reason that things like this happen is because Israelis being murdered does not fit an anti Israel narrative in which Israelis are the oppressors and never the victims. So, because of this narrative, you have people outright denying Hamas's brutalities or justifying them or both.
Now, how did your batchmates or faculty member react to this whole incident? Like when the first correction, when your article changes were made to your article, how was the reaction on campus?
So many were disappointed, especially Jewish students, and especially students who worked at and had connections to the university newspaper. But I will also say that on an anonymous online social media app for Yale students, there were many students who were liking a post that actually disparaged my article and said that it wasn't well written, which had nothing to do with anything, right? The controversy was about the YDN, the Yale Daily News, and their mistakes. But a lot of students didn't want to focus on that because they can't take responsibility for their denial of Hamas's brutalities. And so instead, they turned to attacks against me.
Now, this brings me to an important question. We have been seeing reports of Jewish incidents across several US universities. For example, in one incident that happened at Stanford, within a week after the Hamas attack, a lecturer had singled out Jewish students in class, and he tried to justify the Hamas attack. How do you think student groups like Yale for Palestine play a role in fueling anti Jewish sentiments?
Sure. So they are at the front lines of creating anti Jewish hatred, right? They're using social media, they're spreading this to their friends. I had a Jewish friend who got a message from them asking them to attend one of their anti Jewish, pro Hamas events. And he was like, why are you sending this to me? But they're, you know, indiscriminatorily trying to make their case that Israel is evil and the oppressor, and the Jewish people right now are the oppressor and evil and committing a Holocaust against Palestinians. When in fact, the case is the opposite, right? October 7th was an example of anti Jewish genocide, but they cannot acknowledge that. And so instead, they spread the opposite to their peers. And you know what? I'll share a really interesting story that I think shows how dangerous this is that there was a high school in Queens, which this past week, students found out that their teacher attended a pro Israel rally, and they spent over 2 hours rioting throughout the school because they were upset that their teacher went to this rally. And the teacher had to lock herself in her office because they were trying to storm into her classroom. And they ripped out a water fountain from the wall, and the NYPD had to send over nearly a dozen officers. The New York Police Department.
Yes, this incident happened fairly recently. This was
Yeah.
last week, I think.
And that is what happens when you spread anti-Jewish hatred, because people really like it. People really agree. They really want to say that the Jewish people is the oppressor, is evil, controls the world. None of it is true, but they want to say it. And so if you tell them it's true, they will believe it, and they'll commit acts of violence, which is what we've been seeing on college campuses and off.
Okay, Sahar, that will be all from my side. Thank you for speaking with me.
Thank you so much.